We talk about the ego as if it's a separate entity for clarity of message. It's easier to communicate about an activity which encompasses so many different forms of attachment, all of which are the same attachment, if we treat that activity as the entity which we take ourselves to be. And if we're going to speak about ego as a thing rather than an aggregate of activities, all of which have the same root of taking ourselves to be separate from life, when in fact there was never any separation to begin with, it's valuable to think of the ego as a screw. Ego is contraction. Ego is the belief that you put in any form of self-limitation. Self-limitation being synonymous with any story that your mind tells you about yourself. The lengths at which you find yourself identified and mixed in with the muddiness, the tenseness of so-called separation is analogous to the tightness of a screw. So the entire spiritual path, then, is not about uncovering anything new, unknown within yourself, but rather it's about seeing through all of the delusions which you have chosen to believe, and now you find yourself believing simply out of force of habit. In other words, we're not adding a new screw or building a structure, but we're slowly undoing this screw. And the entire spiritual journey is that. Every time we uncover a new attachment in ourselves, let it be seen, and ultimately, as it's let go of, the screw gets a little looser. Now, in reality, there is no screw to begin with. And it's not a progression, really, of a screw getting looser, but rather it is a single decision. Am I going to believe in the delusion of separation, or am I going to simply allow what's already there to be? Will I allow myself to remember myself? Or will I choose, and it's always a choice, will I choose to forget myself? Will I unscrew? Not even unscrew really, but will I let the screw be unscrewed by grace? Or will I tighten it? And it is an instantaneous decision. It's always an instant, because you could consider ego, the belief in separation, to be synonymous with the belief in space, and particularly the belief in time. Because anything that occurs in time must necessarily be separate, since in order to reference one thing, you have to exclude it from everything else. Conversely, the instant, the present, is continuous. It's not even right to say it's continuous. It's simply there. Now, every once in a while, you get those experiences that are really strong and very immediate. You might call those experiences glimpses. Certain traditions, Zen, for example, calls the experience satori. We call them awakenings, typically in non-dual circles. And what those experiences are momentary insights into your true nature. A momentary peek behind the curtain from so-called separation to liberation. And really, there is no curtain, there is no journey, you've never been anywhere. And that's ultimately how a glimpse shines through the thinking mind. It's a momentary recognition of one's own nature. And I mention all of this in conversation with the screw analogy because it's almost useful to think like, if you were to take the entire spiritual journey across lifetimes, right, as like just undoing this one big screw, the screw being ego, those glimpses, those satoris, those explosions, are like jumps, where all of a sudden a bunch of the screw is just spontaneously undone by grace. But glimpses are tricky because it's very easy to get a glimpse of something, of truth, and then to find yourself desperate to recreate that glimpse, as if it were an experience that you had to work for, as if it were a state of mind that could come and go, as if it really were a screw that you have to do something to unscrew, right? And this is the problem with concepts like that analogy, is that you always push towards this edge, the invisible space between rationalization, separation, and truth. And when you become desperate to recreate those experiences, you just create more contraction. Because now you're creating a separation between enlightenment experiences, which isn't even a thing ultimately, because enlightenment never comes and goes. You're already enlightened. And separation. The consequence being that you start doing again. You find yourself in the same trap of choosing to make a path, choosing there to be work you have to do, something you did wrong and have to atone for, a way that you have to improve yourself. But the screw gets undone by grace, which means that you don't have to do anything. It's a pretty sick deal. All you have to do is just let yourself be happy. Don't think of it as anything spiritual. I mean, you can if you want to. Obviously, I'm talking about it in spiritual terms, but really, like, you don't have to. You know, the mind is really tricky, but it's also not very complicated at all. It's always the same problem. Separation, separation, separation. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. I'm not myself. So, the loosening of the screw is like the deeper and deeper stages, if you will, of release within yourself. And as it said, the mango only gets sweeter. Spaciousness only grows. So I hope this video is a reminder to something you already know, and you do know it, even if you think you don't, you do, that your natural state is not tightness, it's not storytelling, it's allowance, it's joy, bliss, love, all the same thing. And anytime you find yourself believing in stories which necessarily include separation, Just remind yourself. I'm screwing a screw right now into my own skull for no reason. Only force of habit. You are always here. You haven't gone anywhere. You're not going anywhere. You are God.